Well, hello, AC family. Hey, thanks for taking a couple minutes to listen to my heart today. I'm going to share a couple of things that God has been revealing to me about our desire to be a dynamic movement of God. One of those has to do with where God has called us to serve. So not too long ago, I was sitting in a mega church in Texas. Huge church, lots of people, multiple services, multiple campuses. They probably have more people coming to their churches than we have in our counties. And it got me to thinking, God has not called the EC Church to major cities, major population centers, not even the Bible belts in the United States. God has called us to villages, and towns, and boroughs, and townships, and counties, to those places in rural Pennsylvania, perhaps Ohio, even Illinois, that most of the world would consider unimportant. Just to underline that point, I looked up some stats. This is from the Center for Rural Pennsylvania, and I'm sure it probably is fairly true for Ohio as well and Illinois. Pennsylvania has 48 rural counties, and of course, in the last census, we were told that the population declined by 2%. We're told that the residents in these counties are actually older. We're also told that while some people are moving in, like 124,000 moved in 2019, 109,000 moved out. So there's very little gain. Actually, from 2010 to 2019, the number of births decreased by almost 8%. So in 42 of Pennsylvania's 48 rural counties, there were more deaths than births. One interesting thing is approximately 7% of rural residents in our counties are foreign born. So the world is coming to our doorstep. And finally, 71% of our rural municipalities have fewer than 2,000 residents. So we're not called to minister to the major population centers in the Bible belts and the major cities, but to the villages and the hamlets and the towns and the counties and the townships and these places where the rest of the world might consider it unimportant. Now that's where God has called us to serve. But what has God called us to be? A dynamic movement. So here we're called to be this dynamic movement in geographical places that are not that dynamic, that maybe are shrinking, that are kind of difficult. What I think that means is doing church, preaching the gospel, being the people of God, where God has called us to be, is going to have to be different. We're going to have to be creative. Maybe we'll have fewer churches, or maybe we'll have more churches without buildings. Maybe our churches will be working together. Maybe God will call us to plant micro churches or house churches. What I think, the second thing that God has been showing me is this. We're not quite what we were, and we're not quite what we are going to be. So we're kind of like that awkward teenager, that awkward teenager that's growing into an adult but still has some childish things, and it's that awkward process of giving up childish things in order to gain other things. And sometimes, like an awkward teenager, our hair, or our skin, or our body parts don't all reflect our best. They don't look the best. They don't work the best. Some days we don't want to look in the mirror. Other days it seems to all work well. And we're like, yes, we can see a vision of what we're going to be. So I do believe, brothers and sisters, that we're in the awkward middle at the moment. And that's okay, because it's not the first time God has called his people to be there. The future is bright. Let me read my closing statement from my report to the National Ministry Team meeting that's coming up here in March. The future is bright for this growing, maturing, somewhat awkward at the moment movement, because we have been blessed with a heritage of pioneers who know a thing or two about changing the world with Jesus. We've been called into salvation by the grace of God. And as Luther's timeless hymn declares, the Spirit and the gifts are ours. Our former bishops and leadership teams have prepared the way for us. We have a principle-based community structure that allows us to contextualize into these places God has called us to be a movement. And so, even though we find ourselves in the midst of these challenges, there's amazing opportunities. There's some discouraging surveys, but there's spiritual victories. This movement is happening in the midst of a pandemic of apathy within the church. And so here's what we're going to do. We're not going to remain in the awkward middle. We're not going to remain a child. We're going to grow. We're going to mature as a movement. We're going to intentionally embrace a vision of a dynamic movement, motivated by passion for God, motivated by missionary zeal to reach the lost, mobilized by healthy congregations that might look a little different, multiplying disciples and planting churches and repeating the process until Jesus comes back. Can you think of anything else that you'd rather be doing in this part of the country, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Illinois, New Jersey, Kentucky, that seems unimportant to the rest of the world, but is very important to those who live there and to the God who created each one of them in his own image? Friends, continue to pray along with me that God works in and through us as a dynamic movement of God. Until I see you again, thanks for all you do. Keep up the great work, and God bless.